We have the right to self-government, to self-determination of land. And the people that are here are going to go back and continue the struggle. This is not an end, it's only a beginning.
Hello, welcome to this episode of The True Canadians, the podcast. I'm David Wylynko, your host. The podcast is based on the book by the same name, The True Canadians, which I co-wrote with the Métis writer Patricia Russell. Today we have the honor of being joined by Craig Letendre. Sorry, I got that right? Letendre?
Sure.
Welcome, Craig. Craig's going to talk to us today about harvesting, about fishing, about hunting, and all these things that are of obviously a huge historical significance for the Métis going back hundreds of years, as is well known, and as we hope through the podcast and through our book will become increasingly well known and well understood to Canadians. Harvesting has also become a pretty big issue politically, probably most significantly because of the Powley case that went all the way to the Supreme Court. Which was a hunting case, but we won't be getting into the details of that. We do talk about that in extensive detail in other episodes. But with Craig, we have the privilege of being able to really focus on the harvesting and Craig's history with understanding harvesting and work that he's done to help bring out aspects of it that broaden the knowledge for Métis citizens and perhaps their participation in harvesting. So Craig is the harvesting manager, Métis Nation of Alberta, or the Otipemisiwak Métis Government, and previously was a harvesting coordinator. And before that, you had a varied life with I think you mentioned before we started a lot of different careers. But maybe we could start for our listeners just asking you, I think you're from Lac Ste, is that right?
Correct.
Do you still live there?
I do.
Yeah. So how did this become a passion for you? Often we know that it's like family related, it's culturally, it's community. Tell us a little bit about how harvesting became how you got the bug for this.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me, David. Harvesting definitely started at an early age for me. I can remember, way back, I was probably 5-6 years old. My earliest recollection of my grandfather taking me out fishing. We were commercial fishermen, so we would go and fish at various lakes across the province and setting gill nets, and we would sell a lot of our fish to the fish market, and then we also fish for ourselves as well. That was kind of our livelihood. That's what we lived on primarily. We did do a lot of hunting as well, but primarily a lot of fishing. I can remember as a young boy, 5-6 years old, I had my own, we'll call it a trap line, but I had a little snare line out back of our house, which is an acreage in the country, and every morning I'd go and check my snares. I'd have 5 or 6 snares set, and it was for us it was really taught to me at an early age that harvesting was a way of life. Harvesting was how we lived. Harvesting was how we sustained ourselves. So it was taught to me very early that, to help the family in that regard is what, Métis people did. So I really took pride in my little snare line and bringing, rabbits to the family for sustenance, right? So at an early age, like I said, it was always taught that far. I could tell you a quick little story, David.
Please.
Yeah, I want to say I was 6 years old because I was in school at the time then, and got home from school, got off the school bus, and every day at the school bus, I get off and I go home and I walk past some trees, and it was a nice set of willow trees, and I always looked for, we called them partridge, but rough grouse is what they were, right? So chickens, it was bush chicken they called them, and so walking back, I seen a grouse. And 6 years old, I ran into the house and I said to my grandmother, I should tell you though, I was raised by my grandparents, David. It was they took me in at an early age, and they raised me throughout my life. So went in and said to my grandmother, there's a grouse in the tree. I said, I want to go shoot it, and she's like, no, she's like, you can't take the gun by yourself. You know, you're too young. So wait for your grandpa to get home. And so obviously I was disappointed, and you know, so I went out kind of side and I walked out, and the grouse is still in the tree. And so I snuck back into the house and grabbed the 22, snuck back out and went and shot this grouse. And after I shot this grouse, I was then worried about, oh, geez, I've got this. Like, now I've got to come clean with it. And so I mulled it over and I walked around, and all of a sudden by that time, my grandfather was home. And so I came in the house and I've got this grouse and I got the 22, and, you know, I said, hey, I got this. And right away, my grandmother was, you know, pretty fraternal. She was like, I told you not to do this. I told you. And she's, you know, scolding me, you know, and I can still remember, I can still, it gets kind of choked up, but I can still picture them in the kitchen, and they're trying to be mad at me, but I can, you know, visibly see that, wow, they're proud, right? So they've taught me them, you know, them lessons that, you know, I would be able to take out through my life. So it's a little story, you know, that I'll never forget. You know, that's a,
Well, you know what? That's a really good place to ask this question, and we kind of mentioned it a bit off the top, is and in the pictures that I was showing you from the book earlier, I think you mentioned you knew some folks in that photo of they're measuring what are they doing there? They're measuring the.
yep, they're measuring as fish. Yeah,
Yeah.
the size of the fish. And yeah.
I find maybe more so with Métis communities than elsewhere. Like, my grandfather hunted, but he'd go with his buddies, and it was a pretty much a, you know, bromance exercise of guys who probably didn't really know very much what they're doing. And where I live now, like, I have a place outside Ottawa, same thing. It's there's nothing, there's no family involvement, there's no kids, there's you know, but with the Métis, that's not the case, right? It's actually a real family tradition. May I expand a bit on that?
Absolutely. You know, I can speak even from my point of view, from my family. You know, I learned that at an early age. So in turn, you know, I grew up in Lac Ste, as we mentioned, and I've never left. So it's a small community. You know, we're very rural. You know, I met my wife Heidi in school, and so, you know, we you know, stayed at a residence out in the country and raised our two kids, my son Joshua and my daughter Kirsten. And, you know, I began to teach them at an early age, right? I began to teach them that, you know what, we hunt, and they, you know, I'm not sure if this is with everybody, but, you know, with Métis kids, you know, they understand the importance of that. So I take that with me with, you know, and so now when we do the family fishing camps, the CF Frosty Reels family fishing camps, we my kids, you know, they know everything about that. They know how to set nets. They know how to fish. They are now taking that next step, and they're helping me, you know, teach the next generation and the youth. So it's definitely, I think, especially for Métis, you know, it's very family oriented for sure.
We'll talk about that just in a minute. I'll share another brief story with you about my grandfather. You reminded me when you said you went out and you got that grouse, you were 6?
Yes.
Yeah. So I grew up in the suburbs of Fort Garry in Winnipeg, as I've mentioned before in the podcast, and I'm not Métis. And when I was 11, I got wind that my grandfather and his brother were going to head out for an evening of hunting. I begged them to let me come, and no, I was too young. At 11, I'm too young. So imagine how much farther advanced Métis become, you know, at a very young age when they're
For sure.
when it's a family activity that is understood as something that's being passed down. It was never thought that way for us. But on that note, so you actually run these fishing camps, right? It's an
Correct.
annual thing?
Yes. Yeah.
And it's like 3 days or a week or?
Yeah, so it's run through Children and Family Services, which is another department of the Otipemisiwak Métis Government, and we run. It started out probably about 4 years ago. We had one camp, one weekend, and I think we had 3 or 4 families. It's grown to now, today, we have 5 weekends full of camps, and now we bring out in the 5 weekends, every weekend we bring out a maximum of 11 families. So up to 55 families, up to 250 people. So it's grown. It's so popular that when they put out the call out for families and that's just with any of the M&A departments. Excuse me. With any of the M&A departments, everything fills up like that. It's just quick, right? So when we put the call out for families, we're full in a half an hour. Like, you know what? So now we're at 55 families, but we do this in the winter as well. So we're out on the ice. We're able to have lots of people out there. And so, we've only got a span when the ice is thick enough to when the ice is going off the lake. So, mid-February kind of thing to end of March. So we try to get as many in there as possible. And it's very rewarding to have families. And, I love teaching kids. And, it's a great experience to have the kids out there and to teach them. But it's also very rewarding to have families out there. When some families didn't grow up Métis, some families, just found out that they're Métis not long ago, and now they're embracing their heritage and they're coming out to these camps. And it's very rewarding to teach them how, Métis would have set a gill net back in the day. We teach them every aspect of it, how the gill net goes under it. We use the Métis, it's called a prairie ice jigger. And it was a Métis invention way back in the day. The Métis, were always fishing through the summer, and they had to figure out a way to fish in the winter. They had to figure out a way to get the net under the ice. So it's it's very interesting. When people haven't seen that before and they see that in action, they're pretty in awe that Métis developed that. So
I guess for the wintertime, now with climate change or global warming, it's this so-called season is a bit of a moving target. You really have to be careful to be measuring the ice depth, right?
Absolutely. That's something that we start mid-January. We start because we do various lakes across Alberta, so we will start testing the ice at that point. We have local people, and we'll see how thick the ice is, and when we can get going. We have a lot of stuff planned, so we just want to make sure that we can keep going.
What's one of the lakes that you?
So we one of the main lakes we do, and we do all the Frosty Reels fishing camps at, is Pigeon Lake,
Okay.
which is just southwest of Edmonton, about an hour. We do all the fishing camps there. We also the harvesting department is pretty much a support department. We support all the other departments in all their aspects of what they do. So, one of the other things that we do as well is we support the environment and climate change team with their fish monitoring. And so that takes us to a whole lot of different lakes. We do Lesser Slave Lake, we do Calling Lake, we do Moose Lake, we've done Lac Ste. And that's what we do there is we'll go out, we'll set nets, and the fish that we catch, we'll take a sample and we'll send them samples in to see what the mercury levels are, or what the carbon, what that looks like. And so that's the samples we send in and get tested. So we look for any deformities in the fish, and so yeah, it's a big project as well, and it takes us to a lot of different lakes.
So you're actively involved with the environment department here at the Otipemisiwak
Absolutely.
Métis Government
Absolutely, yes.
in this endeavor?
Yes, yeah, for sure. We kind of they set up the whole process, and we kind of lead the charge in the whole harvesting aspect. So the net setting, we bring out harvesters, knowledge holders in that regard, and we basically set the nets and get the fish for them so that they can take over and send the samples in to get tested.
Okay.
It's pretty awesome. to do that, be part of that.
I want to circle back to that and ask you some more about that aspect of the environment and conservation and this connection with harvesting, which I think is a strong link there. But before doing that, just to finish off of talking about the fishing camps. Okay, so here's a dumb question. My journalism professors used to say, there's no dumb questions, just dumb answers, right? Because that will not be the case here, obviously. But dumb question, is harvesting only for people who are located rurally?
No, absolutely not. So, the biggest thing when it comes to harvesting in Alberta is that, and this was written right into the agreement, is that you need to have an ancestral connection to one or more of the harvesting areas in Alberta pre-1900s. So basically, what they're saying is that, you were able to harvest where your ancestors harvested. So whether you're in Edmonton, so there's four harvesting areas, A, B, C, and D. So kind of A is the northwest corner of the province, B is the northeast corner of the province, D is kind of Red Deer, north to just below Lesser Slave Lake, and C is kind of encompasses around Lesser Slave Lake. So you need to have an ancestor that was born in, lived in, worked in one of them harvesting areas pre-1900s to be approved for harvesting. And so that doesn't matter. It's you still need to live in Alberta to get harvesting rights, but it doesn't matter if you're in Edmonton or if you're in Lac Ste.
So it's about your lineage, really.
Correct.
The history.
Correct.
The agreement. What's the agreement that is it a provincial?
Yes. Yeah. So it's the agreement that the Métis Nation of Alberta signed with the government of Alberta on March 12th of 2019. So now, we oversee the whole harvesting policy and the harvesting agreement with the Métis Nation. That was the biggest difference between when Ed Stelmach brought his harvesting interim agreement.
Former premier.
Yeah. Yep. Back in 2006, the Métis Nation was not involved at all. They did what they wanted to do. So with this agreement, there's probably about 2 years worth of meetings and negotiations where we decided, what size the areas were and, what, the harvesting looked like. It wasn't, we didn't, fully get our way in that regard, but, we figured that we negotiated the best harvesting agreement we could.
Well, so we agreed we're not going to get into the politics.
Yes.
You're not a politician, but I'll just throw this question at you and you can ask it as you wish, and then we'll take a brief break. Obviously, I'm going to ask you about Southern Alberta.
Correct.
And it's not a political question in the sense of what do you feel about negotiations or who should say or do what. But, I mean, historically, there's a case to be made that Métis really probably have resided throughout the province. Would that not be the case?
Absolutely, and that is our fight with the province. One of the things we had discussed earlier, David, is the Hersecorn case, and that was kind of the case that we didn't necessarily win that case, but in that case, one of the things that the judge brought forward is he said that there were no Métis in Southern Alberta. So that's been one of the things that we've been working on to prove that there most definitely were Métis in Southern Alberta, and so we've been working on it, and we want to get back to the bargaining table with the province and discuss Southern Alberta. And hopefully that'll come to fruition here in the near future with our new elected leaders. We do now have a political secretary that is in the Otipemisiwak Métis government, Secretary Grant Lacombe, who is the Secretary for Harvesting and Culture. So I think with him now in our government, I think it'll be a better government to government relationship and negotiation.
We've talked about this in other episodes, and it's a significant area of interest for retired President Audrey Poitras, who does our interlude in the podcasts. And one of the ways, I don't know if this is quite accurate or not, but or even at all. But the way I try to describe it a little bit is to make it understood to people who are not Métis, and is that they say, well, you got to prove you were there historically so that, to have hunting rights. Well, I'm like, okay, well, you're going to give us your address in 1850? Where?
For sure. And that's a big thing for a lot of Métis citizens trying to get harvesting is, we need to, for everything to be above board, the provincial government requires us to have primary source documents that prove where you were and when you were there. So, it can be a challenge at times. So, that's it's definitely something that we've been working on for a long time.
Well, thanks for sharing that with us, because I think that's still an area that's of great interest to a lot of our listeners, for sure. And it's about recognition. I don't know if it wanders into reconciliation. I think maybe the argument could be that it does, and that word now means a lot to a lot of people, like out in society and in the rest of the world. And so, that these things have to be, there has to be an accounting for it. You can't be just sweeping these things under the rug all the time anymore. We'll take a short break. We're talking with Craig Letendre. He's the harvesting manager with the Métis Nation, or the Otipemisiwak Métis Government. And when we come back, we'll circle back to talking a little bit about harvesting and conservation and some other things. We'll be right back.
Hello, this is Audrey Patra. Today, we have a very interesting topic, harvesting. The Métis Nation of Alberta, whenever we talk about Métis rights, especially harvesting, that is a topic that is so dear to our Métis citizens. And we look at all the things that have happened. People have been charged so often for doing what they know they have the right to do. I look at all of the things that have happened during my time as president, the court cases, the people that have stood up to talk about the history of their communities, how their ancestors hunted and fished and trapped, all of those things, and why it is so important to them. We look at cases, whether they've been won or whether they've been lost. They have all brought to the surface the importance of harvesting, the importance of us being able to exercise our rights as Métis people. When the Powley case was won at the Supreme Court of Canada, yes, it was an Ontario case that went all the way to the Supreme Court. But that case benefited all of us in all the provinces, western provinces of the Métis Nation. We had opportunities to work with the Government of Canada to continue to try to have people understand what that really meant and the importance of it to us. We came back to Alberta and we signed a harvesting agreement with the Government of Alberta. That agreement didn't last all that long, but we continued. We continued, along with our citizens, to push the Government of Alberta until we signed a second agreement. And we took a court case, the Hershikorn court case. Even though we lost and it was refused to be heard at the Supreme Court of Canada, there was still benefits that came out of that case in the history that was put out there in the courts, in the public, because the Métis Nation is all about making sure our citizens have the right to exercise those Métis rights that we have within the Constitution of Canada.
So welcome back. We're talking with Craig Letendre about harvesting, its significance to the Métis culture. We're going to talk a little bit about significance to history. Before we go on, I just want to share a little anecdote with you that you might find comical, which is, in cinema, the rabbit is often in cowboy movies and this sort of thing is like well, it's if we have to set camp for the night, well, we'll go get a rabbit, and then what happens is one of the characters leaves, disappears, comes back, and all of a sudden he's got a rabbit or two. And I'm always thinking, well, rabbits are pretty fast.
Yeah.
How the heck do you can you actually just, maybe you could go and spend the night out in the woods and go rustle up a rabbit?
I think I could, definitely one of the things that, and I was definitely taught this at a young age as well, and I still do it to this day. I carry, and back then we didn't have a hunting pack, but, we always carried snare wire. Always. Wherever we went, we always had a chunk of snare wire. And now to this day, even in my hunting pack, I carry a roll of snare wire. So I can go into the bush and I can look for, tracks or, where a rabbit's, got his run and, set a snare and, usually with pretty good luck, if the rabbits are traveling through there, we can set a snare on that trail and usually be fairly successful.
So you have to pull it, though.
No, you would basically what you do is you find a tree where the rabbits are traveling by, and you'll tie the snare onto the tree, and you'll put it out into the trail with a circle, and when the rabbits comes hopping along and his head goes through the snare, the hole in the snare, his head will go through and it'll just cinch around his neck and he's done.
Okay. And so what do you do with a rabbit? You make rabbit stew?
Yeah, rabbit stew. Yeah, for sure. I mean, the good thing is with a rabbit, you can eat the whole thing. And I tell this story, quite often. One of my favorite things as a kid, because we ate a lot of rabbit, and people, some people get kind of grossed out by it, but one of my favorite things was rabbit brains. We would boil up the rabbit, and we'd split the head open, and I used to smear the rabbit brains on a piece of toast, and it was just delicious.
Really?
So a lot of people are kind of like, oh, I couldn't do that, but we used to fight over it.
How about that? Yeah. I wonder if it would make me smarter.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, so one of the ways that I became aware of you and your work was that you do presentations on harvesting, and you did one in August, and it was sponsored by the Environment and Climate Change Speaker Spotlight. Maybe talk a little bit about why you took this on, how the reception has been, what you take away from it, what the participants take away from it, and then we can talk a little bit about the environmental aspect.
Yeah, you know what? So this started quite a while back. I did a podcast. It was the real, keeping it real.
Right.
Yeah. So that was one of the very first. I think I was the second guest on that. Harvesting is a big, high profile kind of department. So everybody's got questions, and so we get pulled into a lot of different podcasts and spotlights, and it's always well received. There's always a ton of questions, and one of the things I made sure that when we do these spotlights, that we have an avenue for people to ask questions. And so I'll typically give my spiel and talk about harvesting, and we'll kind of harvesting through history, starting from when we signed the agreement, and then we'll open it up to questions. And that is always a big thing for citizens. They it's kind of a funny thing, because everything that I talk about is all on our website, all on our harvesting pages. Everything that you want to know about harvesting is on there. But I think, and you know what, I don't think I'm any different. When I want to know something about something, I want to talk to somebody and I want to hear them tell me that, right? So
I see. Even though it's on the website.
Even though it's on the website.
Okay.
Right? So, I understand that it's, we get a lot of questions that are, easily answered on the website. But like I said, people want to hear directly from, the horse's mouth, per se. So they're well received. The one in August, the Environment Cloud, I think that was the the biggest uptake in followers they had yet. So I can't even remember. Well over 100 people signed on, and so it was very well received.
I guess you weren't able to tell from the types of questions how many of these people were actually seasoned harvesters themselves versus who were novices that were interested in.
And you know what? I think I would be able to infer that a lot of them might be first-time harvesters, and a lot of them might be, new to harvesting, and maybe they just got their harvesting card. That seems to be, who I'm getting a lot of the questions from. Questions like, so one of the things that a lot of people always want to know is, what are my limits? What are my limits, right? And how many can I get? And we don't talk, we, the Métis, we don't talk about limits, right? So, although we can harvest as much as we want, what we like to talk about is, your limit is enough to feed your family. So whatever that looks like for your family is what we that's your limit. We don't like to put a number on it. We have the ability to hunt all year, although one of the big things I talk about is, we strongly urge harvesters not to hunt, from end of January kind of to end of July. And for obvious reasons, ever conservation,
Reproduction.
yeah, reproduction. That's when they're having babies. But even more so, the males lose their horns, right? So they lose them in end of December, beginning of January. So
Yeah, what?
the males, elk, bucks, yeah, they all lose their horns, right? So if I'm looking out 300 yards into a field in February, and I see an animal and it's got no horns on it, I'm hard pressed to tell if that's. And I'm a harvester. I hunt a lot. I have a very active harvester. You're hard pressed at 300 yards to tell if that's a cow or a bull. So that's why we strongly urge no harvesting. Because if it's February and you kill a cow, you could possibly be taking down 3 animals. Because there's a lot of moose that will have twins, right? So
Okay.
you could be you're killing that cow moose, and you could be killing the calves as well, that unborn calves. So we strongly push conservation.
Right. Well, so on that point, the harvesting presentation you did was sponsored by the Environment and Climate Change Speaker Spotlight. So I'm curious, maybe if you could expand a bit about on what this, where's the connection between having an understanding of harvesting and an understanding of, and you've kind of touched on it a little bit, an understanding of environment and conservation and how it plays in to climate change. I'm not sure. Maybe you know.
Yeah. You know what? I think the big tie-in between environment to harvesting is that whole land-based learning aspect, right? It's, environments, deals with, the conservation and that side of environment. And harvesting obviously deals with the animals. So, they're dealing a lot on the conservation side, and, that's kind of what they're, another big tie-in with harvesting is the conservation. So they go hand in hand. Like I said, they're all land-based, learning between environment and harvesting.
Did you have many people asking questions in your presentation in August about that connection?
Yeah, for sure. We get a lot of people, asking about, what conservation looks like, and what we see going forward in regards to the moose population or the elk population and the trends that are taking place. So we definitely, like I said, we definitely push conservation more than more than I think other people would.
Okay, we'll finish on that in a minute. The idea of your vision or your forecast for the future of harvesting. And I'm very particularly interested in the notion of population depletion, and I'm going to ask what you think about that. But we were talking earlier before we started about we would be remiss not to touch on the incredibly ingrained historical significance for the Métis of harvesting, going back to the fur trade and the buffalo hunt. This is what caused the whole turmoil, or at least contributed to the turmoil between, Louis Riel and Johnny MacDonald, and putting in the railway through. And before that, the fur trade. Jean Taillé, in her book, The Northwest is Our Mother, that came out in 2019, that we used with our book, she even characterizes the fur trade as having been, unbeknownst to most Canadians, kind of like the sort of the launching of what would become the highways, across the country and up north. And so you mentioned the historical significance a little bit earlier, and maybe touch a little bit on that, because it's really something that people should be reminded about, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. As you mentioned, the fur trade. The earliest fur traders were the Métis. They brought, I think, they're the ones that kept all the forts running, right? With their harvest of the buffalo, and their harvest of animals, and teaching them how to make pemmican, making them the buffalo robes. That was all the First Nations and Métis people that took that on throughout history. So that's I think that was really how everything started. When we talk. One of the things that I wanted to bring forward as well is Métis women in history. Our strong Métis matriarchs. In my family, we had a lot of strong Métis matriarchs. My grandmother was one of them, and although my grandfather taught me a lot about fishing and hunting and everything, it was my grandmother who taught me how to fillet a fish, how to process animals, how to do all of that kind of stuff. And that's been throughout history. Women, Métis women in history, we would really be nowhere without them. They were the ones who did all the heavy lifting, back in the day. The men would go through and do the hunting and the fishing, and leave the women to do the processing, right? So they'd process the fish, they'd dry the fish, they'd smoke the fish, they'd make the pemmican, they'd dry the meat. So they played a huge role in history, right? So it's something that I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about, because my grandmother was an incredible matriarch that I learned a lot from her. So
I think you mentioned, linking your grandmother to you all the way down through the generations. Your daughter is now involved in educating people on this.
correct. Yeah. So both of my kids, they help us out now at the Frosty Reels fishing camp. And one of the things that my daughter Kirsten has taken on is that she now talks about Métis women in history. She does a little talk during the camp, and it's very well received, with the camp recipients. So a lot of people come up to her and talk about some of the things that she talks about. So, and she's refined her presentation, and she's getting really good at it. Yeah, it's an honor to have my kids working alongside me with the family Frosty Reels fishing camp. So it's like I said, it's a big honor to have them. Obviously I've taught them, and so now they're starting to take on some of them responsibilities of teaching the next generations and teaching other families as well. So yeah, it's humbling and very honoring.
Okay, well, speaking of next generations, then we promised we would end on talking about the conservation aspect. There has always been historically, and I mean, there's this whole Ducks Unlimited thing, and um, there's always been a bit of a tension between uh, you know those who wish to harvest and who see their role as being one that contributes to sustainability, and then people who go, well, why is hunting occurring? Why is any of this occurring? And we understand why with the Métis it can be part of a livelihood. Um, but where do you see that? Where do you see that debate going or landing, and where do you see harvesting playing a role moving forward from what you've seen in your presentations and the work that you do, as an attribute or an aspect of Métis culture and practice for the future?
Yeah, you know what? I think in the eh, let's say in the last 50 or so years, harvesting, I'll say in some of the remote communities and, some of the rural communities, harvesting is, still some of the only sustenance they have. And that might be their whole sustenance. But, I think, mainstream, a lot of people, have jobs, so they can go out and they can buy other foods. And so it's not that they rely on it. But what I see now is a lot of people getting back to it. There's a lot of talk about what you're getting in some of the foods that you buy at a supermarket. So now we have a lot of people who've taken on harvesting, and they're saying they want to get back to their traditions. They want to start feeding their family meat that is organic and it's not shot up with chemicals and hormones and whatnot, right? So we heard a lot of that at our spotlights, is that people are starting to get back to the old ways and start, getting back to taking on harvesting and feeding their families, traditional meals. And, obviously, like I said, for myself, and I learned this, from my grandparents as well. We've always had a garden, so we grow our own, fresh vegetables. And, that's one of the things that we want to, in the harvesting department, we want to bring that forward in the coming years as well. We want to, start teaching, people how to grow gardens, because not everybody grows a garden, right? And that's your own way of, sustaining yourself with fresh vegetables that you've grown. And a lot of people do, harvest plants and harvest berries. So that's just kind of taking it a little bit further and growing your own sustenance and being self-sufficient. I think there could be a lot of people who they're not making a whole lot of money, and they need to supplement their home with some meat or some fish. That's another aspect, right? We talk about harvesting. We always like to harvest in the fall, from August to kind of December kind of thing. And then our focus always goes to fishing. So that kind of sustains us for the rest of the year, being able to fish and put fish in the freezer.
You know what? Maybe we'll end on this, because this is an interesting distinction about, and it plays into the environment too, understanding where food comes from, people becoming more conscious of it and conscientious about it, because you're right. And out in my world, like, it's my grandparents gardened, and we would benefit from that and eat those fruits and vegetables and so on. But now it's like, well, where does food come from? What comes from the supermarket? And more people are going to the supermarket now and going, well, where's this actually really from? And what is in this food?
For sure.
Because I'm not very capable of finding a supermarket where their vegetables or fruit are actually tasting nothing like what my grandmother would produce.
For sure.
Not even remotely.
For sure. And that's the other tie-in with fish as well, with the environment and doing the environmental testing. And that's how this all came about. So they have a project where people can, I think they have a port where they can write in and say, you know what, I caught some fish at Lac Ste, and they tasted a little funny, and maybe one fish had a sore on it. So that's what led to the environmental testing, and for them to want to find out, what do these fish look like, and what is in these fish, and are there too many hydrocarbons, are there too much mercury? So that's kind of what led to that testing, is people tasting them and saying something's up. Can you guys check into this?
You can look into this by going on the website. It's the
Absolutely, yeah, the
Environment Change Department.
absolutely, yeah, for sure.
Excellent. Great.
Yeah.
Well, we've been talking with Craig Letendre, the Harvesting Manager, Métis Nation, and Otipemisiwak Métis Government. It's been a pleasure having you today, Craig. Thank you very much for your time.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me, David.